What's up, Dream Team? Welcome to Team Night. I'm Alger, and I serve as the director of the Dream Team here at Highlands, and I get to work with each of your incredible campus directors day in and day out. It's my privilege to serve alongside you, the amazing Dream Team. We're gonna have a ton of fun together tonight. PC is gonna share with us, and we have a special surprise guest, and it's gonna be amazing. I know tonight will encourage you and equip you for the season ahead, and I can't wait. Before we do that, I want to take a moment to give a shout out to you, the Dream Team. Some of the things that I love about you is that in this season, you're fired up. You're pressing into loving God and loving people like never before, and that's our goal. You're faithful. From outreaches to services to taking your small groups to Zoom, you've been there reaching people. And lastly, you're flexible through all the adjustments from online services to in-person services, online growth track to 21 days of prayer. You've rolled with the punches. So let's keep going. Great job. Thank you. You've risen to all the challenges, and we're excited to bring that same energy into the fall and see all that God has in store, because there is more. Now, ordinarily, we would love to be all together at your campuses, celebrating each other and salvations and team wins. So we wanted to find a way to still do that and make it personal and hear from the campus pastors. By the way, your campus pastors, they love you so much. I need you to know that tonight. They think about you and pray for you and care for you more than you'll ever know. And your campus directors too. I want to give them a shout out because they love you as well, and they work tirelessly to make serving enjoyable and effective for you. So thank you to them. But tonight, we wanted to give you a shout out and love you well. So here's a little tribute to you, the Dream Team.
Dream Team.
Dream Team.
Hey, Dream Team. Together, we have recently faced some uncertain times.
Although the last 5 months have looked different.
You adjusted how you serve
to make an impact even greater than before.
Even greater than before.
You've embodied 1 Peter 4:10.
1 Peter 4:10, which says,
God has given each of you a gift.
from his great variety of spiritual gifts.
Use them well to serve one another.
And man, have you served one another.
Serving meals.
Praying for others.
Jumping on new teams.
Even writing encouraging notes to neighbors.
You were made for this.
Making sure our miles and miles of hallways are clean.
Blessing frontline workers.
Hosting food drives.
Rocking babies.
Rocking masks.
Sanitizing the cruise ship staircase at Grandview.
Through it all, you've stayed Oxford strong.
During uncertain times, you've done amazing things.
You have stepped up and done some amazing things.
You have shown love to all of those around you.
You were made for this. At the start of this season, masks were the greatest need.
You stepped in and made thousands of them.
41,000 to be exact.
41,000.
When kids were unable to receive lunches from schools,
You provided 1,304,209 meals to families.
You were a lunch packing group.
The essential workers in our communities,
You know, the ones that have worked around the clock to keep us healthy and safe.
Yeah. You fed them too.
Hey guys, you were made for this.
You may not have been parking cars.
But you celebrated graduating seniors with an awesome drive-through giveaway.
You were made for this.
And you may not have gotten to serve at Summer Blast.
But you've written postcards to thousands of children in your communities.
You might not have been able to figure out Zoom.
But yet and still, you figured out a way to connect with thousands of people through small groups.
You've even been sharing your smile with a neighbor who desperately needs it.
I can see that smile right now.
You've hosted car washes for teachers returning to school. You've given blood for those in need.
You were made for this.
The bottom line is,
you have never stopped loving people.
Your commitment to serve reaches far beyond the four walls of your campus.
It spills over to your family.
Your community,
And your city.
your commitment to serve reaches far beyond even our crowded parking lot.
thank you so much for all you've done and what you continue to do.
We are proud to serve the Chapel campus.
We are proud to serve the Gadsden community.
Grandview, Best View.
The Opelika campus,
The Chase.
Futon delay.
Holla at McCalla, hey!
The Shoals.
The city of Troy.
Tuscaloosa.
Woodlawn Strong,
The Mobile Bay campus.
to West Behan.
In the gum.
Thank you, Dream Team.
You
Were.
Made for
This.
Hey, team, thank you so much for taking time to have a virtual team night. I wish we could be together, but of course, in this COVID reality, a lot of things have changed. And it's been a long time since February when we were all together to have our team night. And I miss you and I love you. But of course, we're in the process of rebuilding our church and getting our teams back together. And we're coming up on a small group semester. And of course, throughout these 5 or 6 months of COVID-19, we've been mobilizing our dream teams to serve projects. And I want to thank you for that. But this is an important season as we kind of ramp back up to these in-person services. And literally, we can't do church without you. You're an important, if you will, essential worker. That word gets tossed around a lot these days, but you're essential. You're essential to the kingdom of God. You're essential to the people who have been drifting over the past 5 months. And if there's ever a time really where the workers, the essential workers of Church of the Highlands are needed, it's now. And so I wanted just to take this evening together, or whenever you're watching this team night, and just be sure that you're mobilized and encouraged and even trained. And so we have a little leadership surprise for you tonight that I want to give you that'll help you grow in your leadership. But let me encourage you in a couple things. And on September 6th, I'm going to have Vision Sunday. I'm going to share a lot of things that are happening around Highlands, things that would have happened without COVID-19, but also some new things in response to it. And our church is going to continue to build and grow and reach people in Jesus' name. And again, you're a huge part of all of that. And of course, on September 6th, we'll also launch a small group semester, both in person and some virtual small groups. And I just want to say to those of you who've been serving for a long time, this might be the time to kind of ramp up your own leadership. I believe if you've been here for years, you've grown and you've matured. And this is a good time perhaps to even think about, wow, I've been a greeter, I've been on worship team, I've served in children's ministry. This is the time for me to consider being a small group leader. And so I would love for you just to pray, put it before the Lord of just, you know what, I can lead. I can get on a Zoom call once a week with 8 of my girlfriends or some of my buddies or some of these couples and just encourage them. And I think people need that right now. And I also believe it's going to help you if you were to do that. People need encouragement right now, but you're going to be surprised how much that will feed your own soul whenever you serve others. And I think that's really critical in these days. So please pray about that. Please pray about the possibility of hosting a group. We have some brand new curriculums that are going to be released this fall, in addition to all the other curriculums that we've always used. And we've even are piloting some around the areas of racial reconciliation and diversity, which I'm excited about, kind of creating some conversations there. We're starting a book study through the book of James this fall, and we're going to provide content where you can just discuss the messages over that 9 weeks. So there's a lot of things that actually could be a lot of fun in person or online, and I want to encourage you with that. A few weeks ago, we had our Grow Conference. And for the past 5 or 6 years, I've included my good friend, Dr. John Maxwell, to come and just give one session to the thousands of pastors and leaders who come to the Grow Conference. And of course, John I consider him to be the world's greatest leadership guru. I've watched him over these past 6 months throughout COVID-19 and watched him have to reinvent himself, really just live through it like all of us are living through it. And I've seen him do it with an amazing, not only amazing attitude, but an amazing leadership gift on his life. And on the 5th session of six sessions we did at Grow, John addressed the conference. And it was spectacular. Our own team and staff came to me and said, man, I don't think I'll ever be the same. That was a spectacular leadership lesson. And I believe you ought to hear it as well. I want you to listen to this leadership talk that John prepared for the Grow Conference and just let your leadership grow and let God speak to you as he gives us these principles. Take a look.
What I want to do is just kind of take a few minutes and kind of father you again, because that's kind of my calling at this age, is to just father leaders and just help you see big picture, pull out some wisdom for you that will just allow you to go to a whole new level And so when Chris asked me to speak to you, and I, of course, wanted to serve him, and I asked him, what can I help you with? Obviously, he pointed to the fact that leading during a crisis or an uncertain period is a very challenging time for not only people, but leaders. And how do we do it well? And so I just on my iPhone, I just, after listening to him, I just put down here what I call some lessons that I've learned in the crisis. These are just crisis lessons that I want you to have because, again, I think the more that we draw out of our difficulty principles and life-changing lessons, the better we are to not only meet that difficulty, but be ready and prepared for the next one that comes our way. Because trust me, if you're leading, you're always going to have challenging times. I again share with people all the time that everything worthwhile is uphill, and it is. And if you're leading, it's uphill, and the hill doesn't stop for you. It doesn't level for you. We just have to keep climbing. That's why we have to be intentional. So let me just give you some of the lessons that I've learned through the crisis, and in no particular order. They're just simple. I just wrote them down here, and let's get going. The first lesson I'd like to talk about briefly is that our best lessons are learned in our worst times. So when I look at what we've gone with the racial tension, with the COVID-19, with all the stuff that we've gone through, it is truly the worst of times. But for a leader that really is teachable, it's the best of times. I've made a practice for 40 years to do something that I encourage you to do. Every month I have what I call a learning lunch. A learning lunch is just very simply, I ask somebody to go to lunch with me that's bigger, better, faster than I am. And I ask them to go to lunch with me so that I can learn from them. And it's always the same. I take them somewhere, wherever they want to go for lunch. I buy the lunch. I don't even have lunch. I just have my legal pad out. And because I want to write down answers, I want to learn from them. It's a learning lunch. And to get the most out of that learning experience, over the years, I've learned that there are 7 questions that if I ask, they'll really help me to make that learning experience the very best I possibly can. And one of the 7 questions is, what is the most important lesson that you've ever learned in your life? Now, I've done this for 40 years. I've asked this question hundreds of times. Different leaders, different backgrounds, different countries, different ages. But when I ask, what's the most important leadership lesson that you've ever learned? The answer has one thing in common, regardless of age, culture, country, or time. When I say, what's the most important leadership lesson you've ever learned? They always, not sometimes, not most of the time, they always take me to a time in their life that was quite difficult for them. A valley experience, a dark experience, a crisis, okay? And they began to share that difficult time with me and what they learned from it and how they came out of it. Not one time, and I know that somebody's learned their most important lesson being successful, but not one time in my experience has a person said, well, let me tell you something. It was the best year of my life, and I learned the most important lesson that best year, and I was on top of the mountain, and they've never shared with me lessons out of their successes. They've always shared with me the most important lessons come out of their difficult days. Now, I love that because I happen to believe that we learn more during difficult times than we do during good times. I think in good times we get a little arrogant. I think we get a little careless. I think we get a little automatic. I think we begin to say, I want to put everything kind of, I've got this down now. Don't want to change anything. I think the greatest detriment to tomorrow's success, to be honest with you, is today's success. But there's something beautiful about difficult times. First, there's something beautiful that happens within me, in my spirit. It's very humbling. During difficult times, I realize I don't have all the answers. During difficult times, I realize that I need to depend upon God. During difficult times, I realize I need to depend upon others. And there's something that humility and teachability and reality brings to me that just allows me to learn more during the difficult days than the good days. And I say that to you because the question I'm asking you as you go through the crisis is, what are you learning? Is it changing the way you think? And off of your learning, how are you improving? I would hope that this crisis will not be looked at in 2021 as a wasted year. I said it was a wilderness year. There's a difference between a wilderness year and a wasted year. In a wilderness year, you're on hold and you seem to go in circles and you don't make the progress that you really want to make, and you've got to take a lot of detours in a wilderness year. But there are a lot of great things that can happen during that time if you have the right perspective of it. So, I think the question I would be asking in 2021, if I was getting ready to hire a staff member, the question I'd be asking is, talk to me about how you utilized 2020. Tell me what you learned from it. Tell me how you expanded from it. I know in my life, as I look back at the lessons I've learned as a leader, all of them were birthed out of trials, questions, heartaches, disappointments. When I wrote the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the reason that works is because those laws work regardless of time, regardless of country, regardless of culture. That's it. That's why, and they're timeless. But when I wrote the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, what was interesting is I could go and back to a time, a place, a situation, an experience, a person that was catalytic for me learning that law. And again, they were learned in difficult times. So don't despise the dark days. Embrace them. In fact, this will separate you from most leaders. Don't curse the darkness. In the darkness, reflect and ask yourself, what is God wanting to teach me right now? The second lesson I want to talk to you about concerning crisis that I've learned in the crisis is that what you focus on, what I focus on, expands. In other words, very simply, what I give attention to gets bigger. Now, in a crisis, it's hard to focus. If to define crisis, I would define it as distraction. Change happens, unwanted change, change that you didn't even expect, blindsided change happens. So in a crisis, we get very uncomfortable very quickly. And so it's very easy for us, instead of having traction to pull toward something, to be distracted and to be pulled away from something. And that happens to all of us. It happens to me, that happens to you. And so as I think about this lesson, of what you focus on expands. My friend Dan Ryland has an expression that I just love about, focusing. He said, when we have a tendency to try to do more than one thing at the same time and try to go after, several things. His expression is, pick a rabbit, John, pick a rabbit. And he takes that from, of course, the little illustration that, if you chase two rabbits, you'll get none. Well, I want that one. Well, no, this one's a little closer, and you're back and forth, and boom, they're in the hole. You lost them. Why? You tried to chase two rabbits. You didn't focus. You didn't stay centered on one rabbit. If you would have, you perhaps could have gotten that rabbit. Pick a rabbit. Well, during a crisis, there's a whole bunch of rabbits running around, and there's a tendency for us to be running around trying to catch all those rabbits and trying to make sense out of what's happening. And I just want to share with you that the hardest time to focus probably is during a crisis, because it's almost like the tail begins to wag the dog, and all of a sudden people emotionally, get stirred up, and all of a sudden we're being led by what we feel, not by what we know, and it's a very challenging time for leaders to stay on course. I teach a principle called advanced attraction, which basically says that if we know who we are and we know what we want to accomplish, and we start moving, oh, that's a key. Start moving. Because during a crisis, the tendency is for us to stop moving. That's never good. But if we know who we are, we know what we want, and we start moving, then the advanced attraction begins to happen. We begin to, in advance, attract people, places, incidents, resources, opportunities. We begin to attract them to us because the attraction is the fact that we are moving. While we move, we attract. I run to people all the time and say, well, I haven't started yet because, honest to God, I don't have the resources. And I say, well, you have to start to get the resources. It's like people when they ask me about writing. I'm asked about writing all the time, and people say, well, okay, could you help me? I really want to write a book. Okay. Well, what's the number one thing I need to be able to know and do to write a book? What do you suggest, John? And I simply say, oh, that's very simple. Start writing. And they give me this look like, start writing? Yeah, start writing. If you really want to write a book, the first thing you do is start writing. Now, I know why we don't. We don't because we think, well, I don't think I've got it. I haven't thought it out clearly enough. And I don't think I'm really ready for that. Well, let me tell you something. You're never ready for writing. You're never ready for speaking. You're never ready for anything the first time. In fact, I teach people all the time, you're never good the first time. I don't understand people say, well, I haven't done that yet because I'm really working on it. And when I do it, I want to do it right. I just smile and say, well, you won't do it right. Well, when I do it, I want to do it perfect. You're not going to do it perfect. You're never good the first time. In fact, the only reason we do something for the first time is so that we can have a second time. Because what happens is you learn to lead by practicing leadership. That's a fact. You don't learn to lead by reading a book. You learn to lead by action. You have to practice. And if we're never good the first time, we want to get that one under our belt so we can have a second time and a third time. And, after a while we have a lot of times. And if we've practiced and we've reflected well and we've made changes, we get good. When people talk to me and say, John, how do you write that many books? Well, I started with one. And the first book was only 100 pages. It took me over a year to write it, and it wasn't any good. But I kept writing. People say, well, how did you learn how to communicate like you communicate? Well, I don't mean this unkindly. I've spoken 12,000 times. Okay? I mean, think about it for a moment. If I'm not good after 12,000 times, I really need to pick another profession, don't you think? Well, how did I get good? Well, 12,000 times. The point is very simple, and I don't want us to miss it. That there's a tendency for us to get distracted, and I never heard anyone talk about how I was distracted as I achieved my dream. And what you focus on expands. When you think of the children of Israel in the wilderness and the 12 spies, and they sent them over to check out the promised land, and 12 came back, 10 said no, 2 said, let's go. Now let me say they both presented their case, and in both cases they had reality. And the people that said no, they focused on all the problems, and the people that said let's go focused on all the opportunities. The people that said no focused on themselves. In fact, they said we were like grasshoppers in their sight. Caleb and Joshua, they focused on God and said, we're more than able. But here's what I know. In distractions and during fear and crisis times, you have the fear emotion and you have the faith emotion. And you don't get rid of fear. I love these people say, well, just get rid of that fear. Hello? Could you please tell me how to do that? I've got some things I get anxious about and worried about and fearful of. And I just kind of like to know your incredible magical formula of how you get rid of fear. I've never been able to accomplish that. I have fear in my life. But I also have faith. Faith is a positive emotion. Fear is a negative emotion. And they're both operating. So which one is going to win? The more dominant of the two. If I focus on my faith, I strengthen my faith. It expands. And if I ignore my fear shrinks. You see, what you put before you expands. That's what you're focusing on. What I put behind me, it shrinks. And so what I do is the focus food on faith is the fact that I spend time living in faith, looking at faith, practicing faith, and watching it expand in my life. It's an incredible principle. My father, who just passed away on July 4th. Wow, what a great man. My father understood what you focus on expands, and as we were growing up, if he had something important to teach us, he had two phrases for us. First of all, write it down. So we'd write it down. And when we finished writing it down, he'd say, now put it before you. And what that really meant is he wanted us to take what we wrote down and go into our bathroom and put it on the mirror, so that every time we went in the bathroom, we'd see this statement, because he wanted it to be before us. Why? He wanted to focus. He wanted to know if you're seeing it and it's before you, it's going to get bigger and it's going to become more real, and it's going to be part of your life. Write it down. Put it before you. Well, what I know is that in a crisis, what I've learned is that distraction wants to pull us away from who we can become and what we can accomplish. So just focus on your faith and focus on the light at the end of the tunnel, and focus on what is right in front of you today. You know, with uncertainty, it doesn't do good to focus out 2 or 3 weeks, to be honest with you. You have no clue what's going to happen. So you focus on the things that are right around you, that are present, okay? The third crisis lesson that I want to give you is, again, just got it on my little iPhone here. By the way, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm so proud of my iPhone. My son gave this to me for Father's Day a couple years ago. It's a salt shaker, and it's a flashlight. And it's from the passage where Jesus said, we're to be salt and light. Salt makes things better, light makes things brighter. And so, it's my case. And I get asked all the time. They see that and say, well, what does that mean? It's a great sharing your faith kind of a tool. But as Chris was talking to me about what he wanted from me for this conference, and he said, John, help them to lead in uncertain times, help them to learn from the crisis they're in. I put this in, and so let me give this to you. Everything you want but you don't have is outside your comfort zone. Fabulous lesson. Everything you want but you don't have is outside your comfort zone. You see, if it was inside our comfort zone, we'd already have it. Because inside your comfort zone, you move very freely. It's just easy. You move around and you're familiar, and inside your comfort zone, you do really well. But when we have to get outside of that comfort zone, that's when we kind of pull back and say, wait a minute. And this is huge, because everything I want and need in my life, if it was in my comfort zone, I already have it. So now all the improvement in life is over there. And one of the great things about a crisis is it moves everybody out of the comfort zone. Crisis move us. Everybody has been moved in the last few months. There's no such thing as a person saying, oh, crisis? Things are changing? I had no idea. No. A crisis moves us. The question is not, are we moved? The question is, are we moved in a positive way, or are we moved in a negative way? Because once you get out of your comfort zone, are you taking this time to grow and learn and develop? I'm going to come back to that later. Or are you taking this time basically to kind of veg it and just kind of, watch some more TV and gain a few more pounds? So this is big. This is big. Everything I want is outside of my comfort zone, and I just love this. For example, for me, I'm not technical. In fact, last year, in 2019, I think that my team said I spoke live to 1.3 million people. That's a lot of people. So here comes COVID-19, and no longer do I travel. All my speaking engagements, just like yours, they were all canceled. And so now all of a sudden people say, well, we'd love to hear your message. Can we do some social media? Can we Zoom? Can we podcast? I mean, what can we do? And so immediately when things changed, we changed. And we got out of our comfort zone. I'm really in my comfort zone when I'm speaking to live crowds. And I mean, it's just who I am. It's what I do. I feed off of that. It's so simple. And so now all of a sudden, I'm in a studio. In fact, I've been in the studio today for almost 10 hours, okay? I today alone will do 8 different lessons. I'm not used to technology. I never made a Zoom call in my life until COVID-19. This was all new to me. It's all out of my comfort zone. But yet, last year I spoke to 1.3 million people live in events. This year, in just March, April, May, and June, I've spoken over 3 million people. Almost 3 times the return in a quarter of the time. You see, everything I want, everything I need, it's outside my comfort zone. If I wouldn't have been forced to do this, do you think I would be doing this? Of course not. I'd still be getting on a plane and traveling and doing what I've always done. If I always do what I've always done, I always get what I've always gotten. Wow. So there's something beautiful about being disturbed, being kind of kicked out of our nest or out of our comfort zone. And that's what I love about what's happening with churches. Your church, you're witnessing creativity like you've never had before. You're witnessing opportunity like you've never had before. Why? Because it took you outside of your comfort zone. I was listening the other day on a walk on a podcast to a leader. He started the I forget his name. I'm sorry, but he started the Spartan races. And he sets up Spartan races around the world. It was a very interesting podcast. And he said, I'm going to share with you what the number one motivator of people is. Now, my ears kind of perked up on that walk because I just wrote a book, The Leader's Greatest Return. And it's all about developing other leaders. And I have a whole chapter on 7 motivations of people, how to discover the motivations of people, and then you find them, and then you lead them, and then how to motivate them according to what motivates them. So when he said, I'm going to tell you the number one motivator, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder which of the 7 that I put in my book he'll talk about. And then he just shocked me. He said the number one motivator of people is avoiding discomfort. He said people will do almost anything to stay in their comfort zone. Well, first of all, that wasn't even in my chapter. I've never looked at that as a motivator to avoid discomfort. And the more he talked about it, I thought the more it makes sense. Now, everything worthwhile for your life and my life is outside our comfort zone. If the number one motivator is for us to stay in our comfort zone, guess what? We're never going to be who we could be, never going to be we're never going to do what we could do. Why? Because we're not getting out there. That's why a crisis is good. It put us outside whether we wanted to be outside or not. Some of my greatest lessons I've ever learned and some of the greatest improvements I've ever made were when I got kicked out of the nest. You got to ask yourself the question while you're going through this crisis as a leader. Wow. What am I experiencing right now that I would not have experienced if I wouldn't have been kicked out of my comfort zone? And how am I making that experience an improvement growth tool in my life? Okay, let me give you another one. You've been so patient, and I'm just, again, these are just thoughts that I'm wanting to share with you. The next lesson is a very simple lesson, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about this during the crisis. And the lesson is very simple. Everyone doesn't respond to failure in the same way. Wow, is that true? I said a crisis moves us. And what I've discovered about the moving of the crisis is, for some of us, it's a move that is positive, and for some others, it's a move that is negative. But you're going to get moved. And by the way, no one has ever, when you're getting moved, no one has ever drifted to greatness. If you're going to have greatness, you have to be intentional. You don't drift to greatness. You don't wake up one day and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea how great this is and how good I am. So why is it that some people quit, give up during a crisis, call it their worst day, and it becomes their worst time, and it has become their nightmare, and other people, they not only continue in this crisis, it seems like the longer the crisis, the better they become. They almost seem to flourish. I've come to the conclusion that the difference between people who quit and people who continue is, first of all, the ability to make failure a learning tool. I think people that take failure as a learning tool, like I'm going to become better because of this, I think they benefit from the crisis, just like people who look at failure as it proves that I'm not worth much, or it proves that I don't do well. I think that the way we look at failure really determines how we respond to this crisis. For example, I think one of the most misguided teachings that we have is that failure and success are poles apart. And failure's way over here, and success is way over here. And boy, you want to be a success, and you don't want to be a failure. And if you're a failure, you're not going to be a success. And I think we separate failure and success. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's reality. I don't think failure and success is supposed to be separated. I think failure and success go together. I think it's impossible to have success without failure. I think it's impossible to succeed in your life and not have misses and strikeouts and fumbles. I think that they work together. I think failure makes success more beautiful, and I think that success makes failure more hopeful. And I think that they should never be separated, and I don't think they are. I think while I'm succeeding, I'm failing. And if I have the right attitude and I reframe the losses and the failures and the crisis and the wilderness experience, I think that in my failures, my failures help me to be humble. They help me to be teachable. They help me to ask questions. They cause me to depend. I don't think you can or should separate success and failure. I think they go together. I think they were meant to go together. And I think that we should never do the either or. I think it's the both and. That's what I think. And I think during a crisis, when people separate success and failure, causes them great difficulty. But I think when they say, oh, this is the way it is, you win some and you learn some. And they put them together, then I think all of a sudden it begins to be what I call a total healthy package. Again, remember what I shared with you earlier. When I ask people what was the most important leadership lesson they ever learned, they always point to the dark times, the valleys. Why was that? Because they put success and failure together. And I would just say another thing. This is important. I don't hear anybody talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it for a moment. I think one of the reasons that we don't do good in a crisis is that there are many times we are unwilling to accept failure as inevitable. I think that we believe that we can get so good that we're always good. And I don't think that's realistic a bit. I think failure is an inevitable process in my life. And no matter how skilled I am, and no matter how many grow conferences I go to, and no matter how many Chris Hodges mentoring sessions I sit under, I truly believe that failure is going to happen. Life happens. Life's not balanced. Where did we ever get this idea that somehow, if we're good, we don't have disappointments, heartbreaks, that we aren't human? All of this is part of the game of life. And I think the more quickly we embrace it and realize that no matter how good we are, we're going to have some misses. And because what happens is when I realize it's inevitable, it doesn't inevitably defeat me, because I said, "Oh, I knew that. I knew that could happen. Sure. Can we now go? Can we go on?" You see, when I know that it is inevitable, I don't put upon my own shoulders the weight of always winning, because I don't think I always win either. I think I lose some. I've had some major losses in 2020. It's not been all good. But in the losses that I have, I'm growing and maturing, and I'm becoming better, and I'm developing myself. Now, let me give you another lesson I've learned. I got to hurry here. Another lesson I've learned is that I think that a crisis reveals who the real leaders are. I think a crisis separates the players from the pretenders, because I can tell you right now, in good times, you can be what I call a pretender leader. Say the right things, have the right position, do the right things. And everybody says, oh, they're a good leader. Well, we don't know if you're a good leader or not. You haven't been proven in a difficult time, a difficult period. That's why I say the greatest compliment to a leader is that they become what I call a U-turn leader. And let me describe a U-turn leader. Just think of the letter U for a moment. A U-turn leader is a person that takes something that's going down. It's going the wrong way. It's going south. And they begin to work their leadership, and they slow that negative fall, and finally they kind of level it out. Okay, now they're not winning, but they're not losing. Okay, and then they slowly begin to pick it back up, and now all of a sudden they're over here. Here's the picture of a great leader right here. And you never know how great you are until the crisis comes. Anybody can lead anything at any time when all things are going well. Just find out where the front of the band is and start walking. But when things aren't going well, that's when you separate the players from the pretenders. Let me explain. A puzzle is different from a leadership life. If I'm putting a puzzle together, let's say 1,000 pieces, a big puzzle, pretty hard puzzle. Well, all I've got to do is look at the box, the cover, the front of that box, and there's a picture of what I'm trying to achieve. It's very clear. And so I could get to one section of that puzzle, and I could go look for those colors of those pieces, and basically look at the picture, put the puzzle together. Look at the picture, put the puzzle together. Look at the picture. The picture's clear. It just helps me to know what pieces to pick up. Leadership life is exactly opposite. There's nothing that clear in a leadership life, and during a crisis, it gets really foggy. So what do we have to do? We have to lead without the picture. In fact, what we know is this. We've got to take the pieces and start figuring out how to put them together without any help at all. And the more closely we put the puzzle together, the more clearly we see the picture. But we don't see the picture clear on the front end. And this is where the pretenders lose out. A pretender has to have a clear picture. So when they don't have a clear picture and people emotionally come around them and let their emotions kind of get carried away, what do I find that the leaders do? I find they just get emotional with them, and all of a sudden, I look at a lot of leaders during this crisis, and I said, you're not really helping, you're hurting. I know you got a leadership position, but you're not lifting the load. And in fact, the question I have for you right now, if you're on a staff, if you're on a team, are you part of the problem? Or are you leading people out of the problem? I mean, to tell you, you want to identify with the people as far as connecting with them, but you don't want to identify with the people by having the same questions they have until, after all, you're dragging the church down, not leading the church. Yeah, gosh, I don't want to hire staff to drag the church down. In fact, I don't need to do that. I got people who do that for free. It's like criticism. I don't need to pay for somebody to be critical on my staff. People do that for free every day. Now's the time to prove that you know how to lead. Now's the time to prove that you're a U-turn leader, that you can pull it around. Wow. I was talking to a group of leaders the other day, and they said, well, how do you know that the person's a pretender during a crisis? I said, it's very simple. Instead of lifting the crowd, they become a part of the crowd. I said it's very simple. Instead of coming with answers and solutions, they come with questions and problems. Instead of being secure, they're insecure. Instead of carrying the load, they're part of the load. I remember when I was leading my church in San Diego, my staff would bring a problem to our meetings. And by the way, you don't have to be very smart to find problems. They're everywhere. And I got a little weary of staff members coming and dumping problems. And finally I said, look, let me tell you something. I don't mind you talking about a problem. But when you come, I want you to have 3 solutions, or don't bring the problem to me. You only can discuss the problem when you have 3 solutions. And I said, one of the 3 has to be you, how you can fix it. That was one of the most life-changing, transformational staff meetings I've ever had. And everything turned because all of a sudden staff members realized I've got to be part of the solution, not part of the problem, okay? Well, I think we've learned also agility is essential. It's just essential to be agile, to be flexible, because we're getting blindsided all the time during a crisis. And by the way, I define a crisis as, when somebody said, well, give me a picture of a crisis. I said, it's very simple. It's a detour. When things are going well, you just have your path to get to your desired location efficiently and quickly, and you go right to it. A crisis all of a sudden puts a detour up, and you can't get there that way. You've got to go a new way, a way that you'd never gone before. And the tendency for all of us, me included, is to despise the detour. Oh my, I don't want to be over there. I know I want to be there. I'm clear over here. It's going to take time. It's going to spend money. And so we try to get through the detour as fast as we can, and I'm telling you that's a mistake. In a crisis, when you're on roads you've never been before and you're having experiences that you've never had before, slow down. You have an opportunity to see things you've never seen, experience things you've never experienced, and accomplish things you've never experienced. I encourage you, take the detour tour. There's something beautiful about just fresh scenery. I promise you, on the detour tour are some creative answers for you that you've never seen and would never see if you weren't on the detour. I mean, you're only going to see these for a very short time because then you're going to get back on the regular tour. So you don't want to miss the stuff on the detour tour right now. Take advantage of it. Be agile. Be flexible. Appreciate the new scenery. It's okay. So I close with this thought. I think the leadership question for the crisis is just quite simple. I think when we get through all of this, the question I'm going to ask as a leader to want to try to build a staff and team of leaders is, what did you do during the 2020 crisis? Because for some, it made us better, and for some, it really weakened us. So I ask myself, how have I improved in the crisis? I mean, I'm hoping to get better. And I'm just going to give this to you quickly because of time, but my health has greatly improved during the crisis. I wasn't taking good care of myself. I was running too fast, too hard, too long. And when people would talk to me about my health or my weight, I just say, well, I'm incredibly busy, and I just haven't had the time to take care of myself. When the crisis came and all of a sudden we got quarantined and I couldn't go anywhere, it was very obvious to me the first day that I'd lost my excuse. And by the way, I thought I had a good excuse with my travel. What I've learned is a good excuse is the worst excuse because it's so valid we literally believe it. And so all of a sudden I thought, well, I lost the excuse of wear and tear on my body and travel. I'm not going anywhere. So I made a commitment to eat right and exercise, and 40 pounds later, the crisis has been good for my health. I also said during the crisis, and especially during some of the racial tension and stress, I said, I've got to get another perspective besides mine and all people like me, and I think I need to intentionally engage people of different cultures and different colors and try to be more understanding and to learn from them. And I can tell you, it's been an incredible journey as I have humbled myself and I've sat and said, I've been assuming way too much in my life. and you're going to have to help me. And I have found people so willing and ready to help me during that time. So I'm seeking to understand. My perspective has changed during the crisis, and I've got more margins. And when I wrote my book, Change Your World, I literally revised it 6 different times because I had time. I would have never been able to write the book, Change Your World, if the crisis wouldn't have come. And speaking, I've told you about that. In fact, I did a live virtual conference to Vietnam the other day from this studio, and I started at 10 o'clock at night, and I went till 5 o'clock the next morning because I was on their time. I was live. And it was a tremendous success, but I'm telling you, it's challenging to just talk to a camera, no live people. I mean, it's just Andrew and me in the studio, trust me, and to stay awake during the middle of the night. And I thought, oh my soul, I'm getting better. I'm getting better. I've had my values affirmed during this crisis because a crisis presses us, and all of a sudden we find out if what we teach is what we truly believe. And I've come out of this with I've literally passed the values test. I've had time for reading. I've had time for creativity like I haven't had before. Now I'm done. I'm done. I just want to say to you that reflection turns experience into insight. We've all had the experience of the crisis, but we're not going to get the same value out of it. It's the same way with the Grow Conference. I mean, this Grow Conference is life-changing. There are some of you at the end of this conference, you're going to just soar as a church leader, as a Christian. You're going to say, I got what I needed, and you're going to take off. There are going to be others that are going to look and say, I wonder when the next conference is. You see, I learned a long time ago. It's not what happens to me, it's what happens in me. And I would encourage all of us during this difficult time to just put heavily upon ourselves the spirit of humility, to understand that we don't have all the answers, and there are no easy formulas, and there are no quick fixes, and there's no overnight success. So let's take this time and make it a wilderness time, one of which we haven't been there before and didn't choose to be here, but because we are here, we're going to learn and grow from it. Let's make it a wilderness experience, not a wasted experience. And guess what? Stay true in the wilderness, you get to go to the promised land. God bless. Thanks for allowing me to share with you today.
Wow, wasn't that great? I hope you took notes like I did. I did it twice now. It's just so good, so rich in leadership. And I believe one of the things that we should all do is now ask God, work this into my life. I want to continue to grow, even though the world's changing and there's so much uncertainty. Wouldn't it be great if we look back on this season of the year 2020 and say, man, that was the year I grew the most. And so thank you, John Maxwell, for that great message. Again, I want to encourage you guys in your leadership. This is the time to, if you've not been involved in the Dream Team because you couldn't be over the past 5 or 6 months, this is the time to kind of re-enlist. Let's go. Let's serve people. Let's get on these outreaches. Let's consider leading a small group. And by the way, if you're interested in leading a small group, you know the drill. Text the word groups, just GROUPS, groups, to 74,000. And our team will send you the information and you can decide if that's the right step for you. But I think you would be blessed if you did. Let's pray together before we conclude the night. And again, thank you so much for taking time to let all of us invest in you. Father, thank you for the amazing Dream Team. And God, I pray like the first day they enlisted to be a part of this team, when they had that fire, that desire to be a person who would make a difference. God, I'm asking you to fan that flame. God, bright, strong, fan it into flame. Just let it burn, a passion to make a difference in the lives of others. Lord, I pray for their health, their emotions, their marriages, their leadership growth. God, let us all look back on this season and say, we got closer to you. We had some hardships, God, but we learned some things and we got better. I bless them. I thank you for them. And God, may you put your hand upon us as we serve our church and our city this fall. In Jesus' name, amen. I love you.